A comic without a subplot is boring as hell. Most of the action and excitement should come from the main plot, that's a given, but without side plots to show us the characters and learn about the setting and backstories, the whole thing just turns a little stale. The most interesting thing about subplots is that they let the team behind the comic cut a little loose. As it's the less important part of the story, a little more artistic freedom is generally allowed, allowing for, dare it be said, fun. Sometimes it's maybe a little too much fun, and a major superhero is given an unexpected drinking problem, or Death gets herself a harem. Although these side plots can get absolutely crazy, they're almost always worth it as they're done entirely to be interesting, instead of to carry the plot along. The line between interesting and just plain bizarre is blurred fairly often, sure, but when the exchange is getting to read about an assassin whose arsenal draws solely from dessert pastry, it's more than a fair deal. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are the 10 craziest comic subplots you won't believe existed. Number 10, The Metal Men. Cyborg is a comic with some pretty outlandish elements at the best of times, so adding the almost cartoonish Metal Men to that is as jarring as it is totally unnecessary. The Metal Men are, no big surprises, made entirely out of different metals, and show this by existing entirely in the colour of said metal, which sounds charming, but it is a little jarring with the more natural colours of everything else in the comic. It's not that they don't serve a purpose. Several issues after their introduction into the comic, they actually become a major plot point, but until then they're just weird metal Power Rangers lurking on the page for unclear reasons. The Metal Men go way back, all the way back to 1962, but including them in the Cyborg comic does create a stranger tone. They do allow for terrible metal puns though, so I guess it's worth it. Number 9, Goldballs. You have to feel a little bad for Goldballs. In a world where people can control the elements, never die, and basically be all-powerful, this poor guy got stuck with being able to project golden balls from himself. Presumably, the people working on Spider-Man also felt sorry for him, because that's the only way to explain his appearance in the 2016 run. Within the span of 20 pages, Goldballs knows Spider-Man's secret identity and is invited to live with him, possibly to make up for whatever cruel god or writer dreamt up him and his powers in the first place. Sure, it's exciting to see an Avenger living side by side with Spider-Man, but when said Avenger is a guy who can only win awards for the most hilarious superhero name, you have to suspect that maybe it wasn't worth it. Number 8, Billy Batson's empathy. As if to prove that Shazam is the most wholesome member of the Justice League, part of the 2011 run has Batson see the entire brutal backstory of his predecessor, and then try to have a heart-to-heart with Black Adam so they don't have to fight. Given Billy is still a kid, it makes total sense to have him try and help his arch-nemesis out, as even if they can transform into a tank of a human, few children want to straight-up kill a guy. However, not only does him running into the arms of a known murderer make him look pretty dumb, it's also entirely at odds with the rest of the comic, making it feel like you're flicking between two entirely different TV shows. While we obviously need to know Shazam's backstory, it is one of the weirder ones, and so having parts of it randomly appear here and there in the comic is maybe not the best way possible to have shown it, especially the parts with a casual spot of child murder. Number 7, Death's Dating Pool. The 2014 Wolverine comic is generally a pretty grim and stoic affair, because it's about Wolverine, and so, of course it is. However, there is one small part that totally throws this out of the window, namely when Wolverine catches up with Death. The actual main plot points are handled fairly impressively, but there's the small fact of the matter that Death totally offers to sleep with Wolverine, in the same breath as she mentions that Thanos is kind of clingy. There is no character in the Marvel Universe without some kind of romantic past, sure, but adding Wolverine to the list of potential suitors that already includes Thanos and Deadpool seems so wild somehow. That said, it's also an incredibly funny moment of what was, until that point, a very grim storyline, so it's a silver lining of sorts. Number 6, the Magneto Fan Club. Were the Magneto comic to somehow have all of its magnetic badassery removed, it would still be totally worth reading for his crazy fan club. The events that take place with Magneto's fans in this comic are the type that leave you rereading lines just to double check you aren't somehow hallucinating them. That said, there are probably hallucinations that are at a minimum a little less weird than some of this comic. In order, there are people who like him because he injured them, women who are somehow in love with his powers, and at one point in the comic there's even an actual banquet held by his fans, at which point you've got to wonder if the author is maybe too pro-Magneto. There are comics about actual cults that don't have characters as obsessive over their messiah as some people in this comic are about the Magnetic Man, and whether that is somewhat unnerving or just a little funny is totally up to you. Number 5, Bruce Wayne's identity crisis. Batman has identity crises every other week. That said, Ed Brubaker's spin on it goes to a whole new height of weird, with Batman deciding he is no longer Bruce Wayne and essentially fighting his adopted children to flee into the night. Weirder yet, the fight he has with Nightwing, who is arguably the closest thing to a son Batman has ever had, including Damian Wayne, is completely brutal. Couple that with him outright telling them that Bruce Wayne, the man who has cared for and mentored all of them, is a mask he wears, and you have, at minimum, a very awkward counselling session between all of them confirmed. It'd barely be Batman without a little brooding, sure, but a total disconnect from his human side is more than a little unnerving. There are more graceful ways to have a midlife crisis, after all. Number 4, Carol Danvers' alcoholism. While a totally bizarre choice, the decision to have 1998's Warbird be an alcoholic makes for a subplot that is arguably more interesting than any other major plot of its time, or ever. When a plot contains the members of the Avengers having a legit intervention in the exact same way your friends and family would, something has either gone terribly wrong or terribly right. It's played shockingly realistically, with each member of the Avengers coming forward and explaining how Warbird has been a danger to them through her drinking, and how it made each of them feel. There are probably legitimate therapy sessions where people have talked less about their feelings than the Avengers do in the course of this single comic issue. Any comic that serves as both an entertaining superhero story and a warning on the dangers of alcoholism deserves at least some credit, for sheer originality, if nothing else. Number 3, Deadpool's wife. Who is the only superhero that could make a series-long side plot about his relationship with his wife interesting? Of course, the answer is Deadpool. Initially, the Merc's marriage with the Shikla is a major plot point. After all, it'd be hard to make getting married to a demon queen not an important part of any comic. But the marriage carries on after it's relevant to the main story, and we are randomly treated to Deadpool's domestic love life, seemingly whenever it's most hilarious, which, because it's Deadpool, is pretty often. Although more Adam's family than regular family, it's actually interesting to see how an insane mercenary spends his time at home, outside of the usual eating of Mexican food. Though how exactly they managed to fit this in around the chaos of the other Deadpool storylines is literally anyone's guess. Number 2, the Cream Pie Bandit. A masked stalker hunts each member of the Suicide Squad to strike them down mercilessly, only with cream pies. Having a convicted serial killer lose his mind over being hit by a pie is maybe low-hanging fruit comedy-wise, but damn if it didn't work well. The fact that it happens more than once after some pretty serious main plot points is a little tacky, sure, but the quick change from serious comic drama to surreal comedy only serves to make it all the more funny, almost on a jarring level. It's as though the writers ran out of material for the comic and just spliced in parts of Looney Tunes randomly instead. This plotline carried out through most of the 1987 Suicide Squad too, so a group of people definitely sat down and discussed having Killer Croc get dunked by some of Betty Crocker's finest. Number 1, Iron Man and Hulk's Walk of Shame. In one of the surrealist moments of the Avengers, Bruce Banner and Tony Stark lose a bet and have to walk naked through half of the city they just saved. It's unclear what part is funnier, that the Avengers made a stripping bet in the first place, or that two bastions of heroism and justice were totally game to do it. In a totally bizarre way, it's actually a really nice moment. Given that more often than not the Avengers are at each other's necks, seeing them goof around in an almost childish way is unexpectedly sweet. If there's one thing this proves, it's that 99% of comics would be improved by having ridiculous bets take place in them. The suggestion of folks seeing whatever nightmare genitals the Hulk is packing, though, is maybe a little much. And there you have it, folks, the 10 craziest comic subplots you won't believe existed. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @USlyDogU. Also, head on over to whatculture.com for daily news, lists, articles, quizzes, and all that other good internet stuff. I'm Will for What Culture, and I'll see you next time.